Today on the show, he is one of the most polarizing players among Seahawks fans, and I can't quite figure out why. And so I'm going to take a deep dive today into the Seahawks career of DK Metcalf. Why do some fans feel it would be better for the organization to trade him? Why does he have so many detractors among the fan base? He also has his fans, and he has a lot of positive qualities as well. I'm a big DK Metcalf proponent. So we're going to take a look at both sides of the argument, try to figure out just why people feel the way they do about DK Metcalf, and then I will submit why I think they should feel a certain way about him. That's coming up today on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Welcome officially to summer, you guys. Hope you're having a good one. If you're in the greater Pacific Northwest area, we have been referring to this as January. It's the coldest June on record in the last 12 years. Summer. The old joke around the Seattle area used to be that summer didn't officially start until July 5th. The joke being that the weather on July 4th is not always great either. Hasn't been that way for the last several years. Looks like, hopefully, that's what we're hoping for this year. But the good news is I haven't had to run my AC much, which makes it a lot easier to record a show and makes for a lot lower utility bill. Please hit that like button for this video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to see more, hit that bell so you always get notified of future episodes. If audio podcasts are your preference, you can get the show anywhere. And please subscribe there so that you also are up to date on new episodes. But if you want to hear episodes without ads, you can do that only on Spotify. It's a low monthly fee. I'll have the link in the description. And other ways to support the show, other than just sharing it, rating it, reviewing it, commenting down below, is hit that super thanks or buy me a coffee. Or once you get to that page, you'll see that you can actually buy me a beer as well. But I love both equally, hence the coffee cup here in front of me. It's way too early in the morning for the other thing. How do you feel about DK Metcalf, number 14? Big fan, on the fence. A lot of you wanted him traded in the offseason. It's a topic that won't go away. This week, of course, a video coming out yesterday of him working out again with Russell Wilson and looking phenomenal, I might add. I just, one little side note, I didn't really get into this here, but I think his hands have improved tremendously throughout his career. And there's several instances in that video with Russ where he's just snatching the ball out of the air with his hands. But, as people will do when things go viral, saw a story today on a Seahawks blog about how chatter's going to heat up again about Pittsburgh possibly trading for DK. Metcalf and Russ have been working out in the offseason for years now and have continued to do so even after Russell was traded. He worked out with him last year in LA, I believe, or San Diego, maybe somewhere in Southern California. And they're friends and they get together to work out. It's not a big deal. But I wanted to dig in. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I've teased it on the show a number of times. Try to look at both sides of the argument and get a grasp of why some people think he could be better used as an asset to trade. There was a lot of talk about this leading up to the draft. Trade DK for a first-round pick. Trade him for a first-round pick. Let's get more draft capital and get some more defensive players in this draft. And then even after the draft, when the reports came out that the Steelers had been making phone calls looking for a premium receiver to give Russell and potentially Justin Fields also some more weapons there. I have been pushing back against that the entire time. I'll give you my argument as to why I think he's valuable, more valuable on this roster at whatever market-driven price it will cost to keep him, or his current price, than it would be to trade him. But let's kind of do a little bit of background first. Let's give you the DK Metcalf bio and get from draft day to where we are today, right? We all knew coming out he was a physical specimen. And for that reason, many draft services had him, most draft services had him as a first-round pick. Many had him going in the top 15, some even top 10, the consensus across the board before the combine was that he would be the first wide receiver taken in this draft. He ended up being the 9th receiver taken because the combine happened. There were also some concerns physically. He got off to a massive start his last year at Ole Miss and then tailed off, missed some games near the end of that year because he had a neck injury. And there were some teams that had questions about that long-term in the physical part of it. But at the combine, while he blew it up in all of the explosive testing metrics, a 4.33 40, a 40.5-inch vertical jump at 6'3", 229, shredded low body fat. We remember the video of him interviewing with Pete Carroll, comes in with his shirt off. Pete takes his shirt off, all of that. Gregarious personality. But then the lateral quickness testing happened. And he finishes nearly dead last in both the short shuttle and the 3-cone drill. His short shuttle, 7.38. The 3-cone, 4.5 seconds. By comparison, another former Seahawks wide receiver who came out in that same draft, wasn't drafted, signed with the Seahawks, spent 3 years on the practice squad, had some time on the 53-man roster, was elevated for some games. Cody Thompson, by comparison, a 6.87 short shuttle at over 6 feet tall. I think he was 6'1", 6'2", and a 4.03 3-cone, almost a half second faster in those drills than DK Metcalf. Who would have guessed that? Also, just for a fun comparison's sake, in that same draft, Drew Lock, a 7.03 and a 4.12 compared to DK's 7.38 and 4.5. So after that, the questions became not how's his neck, but can he run an NFL route tree? Can he get separation against good corners with that lack of lateral ability? Is he just a one-trick pony? Is he Daryl Turner? Blast from the past. Is he just a guy that can run 9 routes and go deep and try to win 50-50 balls? Now, he said coming out, I'm a complete receiver. But it definitely had an effect because he not only wasn't taken in the first round, he almost fell out of the second round, of course, before the Seahawks traded a 3rd and a 4th to move up and take him with the last pick of the second round. The only 2 wide receivers taken in the first round, Hollywood Brown and N'Keal Harry. Hollywood Brown was taken 25th. This is crazy that this was only 5 years ago. And now we've had, since then, I think every draft since 2019 has been just stocked with receivers going in the first round. How many first round receivers do we have this year? 7, 8? So Hollywood Brown, N'Keal Harry, is he even in the league anymore? Really only 2 outstanding wide receivers were taken before him. Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, both second rounders, have had tremendous careers, have signed big second contracts. Lots of busts, too, also taken in front of DK Metcalf, Andy Isabella, and brief Seahawk, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. 2 of the 9 receivers, or 2 of the 8 receivers taken ahead of DK Metcalf. This is what Lance Zierlein of NFL.com said about DK prior to the draft. Big explosive talent, projectable upside to become a home run threat as a wide receiver 1. Teams seek out pass catchers with rare height, weight, and speed dimensions, and Metcalf has those for days. While he has the talent to become a full field threat, Metcalf is still an unpolished gem who was the second best receiver on his college team. A.J. Brown and he played together at Ole Miss. Until his skill set is more developed, he could begin his career as a hit or miss long ball threat. However, once it clicks, defenses could struggle to find solutions for him. Looking back now, 5 years later, that is a spot-on analysis by Lance Zierlein. He acknowledges the weaknesses in DK's game and skill set, but also recognizes the potential ceiling. And one thing became evident right away, that DK was going to work at this until he got it right. And I can't remember now who he worked with right after the draft, but it was a very, very famous and well-respected wide receiver coach. And I remember when he showed up for OTAs in camp his rookie year, we were already starting to hear, hey, his lateral route running skills look better than we expected. We've seen a step forward there. But to this day, there are things that DK Metcalf just isn't going to be elite at. He's not Doug Baldwin when it comes to foot quickness and ability to shake off a DB and undress him and just gain separation because of his release off the line or farther down the field. But he has certainly adapted and figured out a way to make it work, because since then, and oh, by the way, regardless of what you think of him, he was by far the best pick in that draft for the Seahawks. It was a deep draft, but one that Metcalf is the only thing still going for that 2019 draft. LJ Collier, Marquise Blair, Cody Barton. I'm sorry if this triggers some of you. Gary Jennings, Phil Haynes, Ugo Amadi, Ben Burke-Hervin, Travis Homer, DeMarcus Christmas, John Ursua, the infamous John Ursua. What he has done since then, he's already 8th on the Seahawks all-time receptions list. When Bryce Coots and Ryan McMillan and I on the Hawk Zone Rundown podcast the other day did an all-time Seahawks team, he got a lot of debate already for what he's done in his first 5 years in the league. 372 catches, 5,300 yards, 43 touchdowns, 14.3 yards per reception, 2 Pro Bowls, and a second-team All-Pro. And when you look at, and I don't have these exact numbers in my notes, but go to StatHead and look at his first 5 seasons compared to Calvin Johnson's first 5 seasons. They are remarkably similar. Johnson edges him out in just about every category, but it's neck and neck. And I did this. So his average season so far through his first 9, 74 catches, just over 1,000 yards, 1,066, and almost just under 9 touchdowns a year, which is kind of an interesting sort of baseline. Would you accept that from him this year? You know, with the emergence of JSN in his second year and another year, Tyler Lockett, 74 catches, 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. Would you be okay with that? I think it's an interesting argument or question, because there are people out there that I have talked to about this issue who would think that that's not good enough to warrant another contract for him in the range being handed out to elite receivers these days, even some non-elite receivers. So just for comparison's sake, 74, 1,009, right? In 2023, Brandon Ayuk, 75 catches, 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. Jalen Waddle, 72 catches, 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. Waddle just got a new 3-year, $85 million deal. It's $28.3 million average annual value. And Ayuk wants a massive deal, so big that the 49ers might have to trade him. See what I'm getting at? So why do some fans feel like it would be better to trade him than keep him? And by keep him, I mean not just keep him on the roster for the next 2 years to finish out this contract, but potentially extend him, which we're going to talk about when we wrap all this up. Number one, I think fans look at the cap hit. You know, they look at the cap hit. And when you look ahead to 2025, and I did this with Jeff Simmons last week. If you haven't watched that episode, definitely do. Looking at the 2025 roster and how it projects, there are 8 players projected to make over $20 million on a cap hit next year. And that makes fans nervous, regardless of the fact the rest of the roster is filled out with tons of guys on rookie contracts with upside, high ceilings. You know, the gist of that episode was the future looks bright. But I think they're looking for some way, because look, fans, and I'm guilty of this sometimes too, we have that fantasy football mentality. We want all the good players. We want to look ahead to 2025 and think that we can go out and be aggressive on the free agent market and sign a star to plug a hole or to put us over the top, or go get a big time linebacker if there is one available, for example, or maybe an offensive lineman, right? If that doesn't come together this year. And so I get that. But I also, you know, I've mentioned this many times on the show, the late, great John Clayton has always said The NFL is a talent acquisition league. The teams with the best talent win. And my philosophy for many years now has evolved to the point where I don't care how much a player costs. I really don't. As long as we keep the ones that are going to help us contend and we figure out how to put the rest of the roster together around them. Like, I don't care. It rarely, if ever, comes down in the NFL to where one player's cap hit is going to keep you from being competitive. His cap hits this year, $24.5 million, next year, $29.5 million. Again, by comparison's sake, a couple of years from now, Jalen Waddle, when his new deal kicks in, he has a $34 million cap hit in one of those seasons. He's a slot receiver. I love me some Jalen Waddle. Had him as a rookie on my fantasy team. He was great. He was maybe my most consistent performer on that squad. But he's a slot receiver. Is he worth $34 million a year to you? Right? Now, so that's one reason that I think people are willing to move on from him is, hey, clear up that cap space. You can use that for something else. Number two, I think the fact that his reception number dipped last year. Not as many catches. He goes from 83 to 75 to 90 in 2022, 66 catches last year. I think that disappointed some people. Now, there are reasons for that. Most notably, they take Jackson Smith-Njigba in the first round, and as the season went along, he became a bigger part of the offense. But also the fact that the Seahawks defense was so putrid that they couldn't get off the field. The Seahawks were, I think, 30th or 29th in drives on offense in the league, and they were dead last, 32nd out of 32 teams in number of offensive plays run. Fewer opportunities for DK or anybody else on the offense for that matter. Another reason that people have soured on DK Metcalf, the penalties, the outbursts. And I get that. And I've had this conversation with many people, right? He's been flagged 10 times in his career for either taunting, unsportsmanlike conduct, unnecessary roughness, or disqualification. The most in the NFL since he made his debut in 2019. His 28 total penalties in that span are 5 more than any other receiver in the league. And yet he comes out and says, I'm not going to change who I am. I read this a little bit differently. If his outbursts are causing a problem on the Seahawks sideline or in their locker room, then it's a problem. I never got the sense that it did. I believe that he is wired tightly to be a competitor, that he wants to be great. And that's why he sometimes snaps. Now, he also really kept it together the second half of the season last year. And now you can start to see that Mike Macdonald, his method of trying to get DK to take the next step in that area and move past that is to put more responsibility on him. Right? Talking about him as a guy who leads by example and a guy who's going to be a focal point of the offense. So let's get into why I think fans should want DK to be here long term. First of all, those cap hits we talked about are manageable. If he were to sign a new deal, you always structure that deal so in the first, well, not always, right? Sometimes, like as in the case of Dre'Mont Jones, they kind of move some of it up to the front. But usually, with a young player like that, DK is still just 27 years old. The first year cap hit's very, very low, so you get a break on that. But also, that happening is going to coincide with Tyler Lockett not being on the roster anymore. And so, whether you sign him to an extension this camp, right, and tear up the last 2 years of his current deal, that would lower his cap hit for this season. More likely, this will be an issue next offseason. There's absolutely no reason for the team. Well, there might be a reason for the team to try to approach him now before some of these other wide receiver contracts are signed, although no one's going to surpass Justin Jefferson's. But it doesn't really make any sense for DK Metcalf to do an extension now. With a new offensive coordinator in place in Ryan Grubb, who there's a lot of optimism around, the potential of an improved offensive line, a supportive running game, a vastly improved defense, giving the offense more opportunities. DK has to know that there's an opportunity this year to have a bigger season and cash in on that next year. So there's really no motivation from his side to get a deal done now. And so most likely this would happen next year. And if it did, then now you're talking about, the Seahawks are currently a little more than $20 million over the salary cap for 2025, although that can be easily remedied with a couple other contract extensions or adjustments, and also just the cap going up because that hasn't been accounted for yet. The cap could easily go up $20 million next year, and then they're flush. And so next year, I think, is a year where the topic conversation around Tyler Lockett's going to get much more extreme. If I don't think he's on the roster in 2025, but even if he is, then that would likely be his last season. It would be the last year of his deal. He's not going to sign a massive contract after that. And so if even if Tyler's on the roster next year, let me get to my point here. Sorry. And DK signs an extension, then now you only have one of those massive wide receiver cap hits. And then the next season, Tyler falls off and DK's cap hit grows. And so to me, that's not a concern. As I mentioned, another reason the offense should improve. I'm expecting it to improve. I'm expecting the offensive line to be better. I'm expecting Ryan Grubb to be better at scheming. We've talked a lot about getting the ball out of Geno's hands quicker, which we saw the latter part of last year, and he had a lot of success doing that. I think a lot of attention is going to be paid to the running game from opposing defenses and to JSN, and even potentially to Noah Fant, who I think is going to be used much more to the Seahawks' advantage as a weapon on offense. And so I think you want Metcalf's unique skill set to be part of that. The other thing, he's a very consistent player. You hear the saying all the time, the best ability is availability. DK plays, and he's had some injuries. Remember when he hurt his knee and it didn't look like he was going to play at all the next week, and he comes out and plays and starts and plays the entire game? He's only missed one game so far in his career. And I remember thinking the first time I ever saw him and watched him on tape and then saw him, with his shirt off and all of that, I thought, guys who are usually completely yoked up like that, we see the soft tissue injuries. We see the hamstring pulls and the calf pulls and the groin injuries and stuff. He takes such good care of his body. He's been durable. You can count on him. Now, why I really believe that this team should do everything they can to sign him to a third contract and keep him long-term, and why I want him to go down as one of the all-time great Seahawk receivers, if not players, is because he does possess a unique skill set. One that I think is hard to find in this league, right? When you think about the great receivers in this league, they're guys that can separate with sudden quickness and get open. DK Metcalf, time and time again, makes big catches, tough catches, in coverage in important moments. And I spent a little bit of time pulling some examples of that so that I can show you, not just tell you, what I love about DK and why I think the Seahawks should keep him. And here's a dive into some DK Metcalf video from last year and even a little bit from 2022. Enjoy. All right, so this you're going to recognize. This is the first Drew Lock game, subbing for Geno Smith last year. Week 12 at San Francisco ends up being a 28-16 loss. But the Seahawks early in this game were in this thing thanks to this catch from DK, where he, I think, shows off his skill set that makes him so unique. I mean, it's a nice throw from Drew, but he's not open. But Drew gives him a chance to make a play, even though he's covered. Right? I mean, that's Ambry Thomas. He's in position, turns his head, jumps up to make a play on the ball. But DK, we see body control. We see his ability to catch a contested ball. It's not easy. Have you ever been part of a tip drill in football? Or a drill where a guy waves his hand in front of you as a ball's coming? It's not easy. I remember watching this live thinking, my goodness, I didn't exactly think it was an exceptional throw. I thought, oh, Good for Drew. He's getting off to a good start. But what a catch from DK. That's the kind of stuff I love. Now, the next week, the Philadelphia game, this is where he really showed what I love about him. So this is, excuse me, it's that Monday Night Football game. Seahawks late in the game, less than 2 minutes to play, are on their 8-yard line, trailing by 4, right? They need a touchdown to win this thing. Jackson Smith-Njigba ends up getting the glory, but DK did all the heavy lifting to get him there, right? This one's just, again, that middle dig route, which I love so much. And you might say, Danny's wide open. Okay, first of all, you're right. Let's watch that again. Let's back that up just a little bit. Makes a nice little subtle move here to deke the DB, get the safety. See how the safety bites on that to the outside, just a touch right here. Right? Just enough, and it leaves it wide open. The safety actually kind of loses his footing there. But this is not, my point is, this is not an easy catch. You can see it from this angle, right? Ball's low. He has to go down to the ground, but it's a huge play, gets him out of the shadow of their own end zone. And now we're off and running at the 26-yard line, right? But that's not even the best catch he made on this drive. So this is 2nd and 5 again. And I have to show you all 22. I can't show the broadcast copy. So it's tough to see this one. But again, he's covered. This is a contested catch, but Locke trusts him. And that's why. I mean, the ball's outside of him, and he catches it kind of with his body and one arm. You can see it a little bit better from this angle. I'll try to pause it. Right as the ball gets there. Like that. How is that a catch? How does he catch that ball? But he does. Inside arm, actually. I said outside arm. I mean, there aren't a lot of guys in the league that can do that. And again, first down, keeps the chains moving. And it sets up this. And this is the kind of catch that I think has become sort of a trademark for DK. Right? He bodies it. He uses his frame and his physical ability. He knows the safety's coming, right? He gets enough separation. He runs the route perfectly so he can fade away. It's a perfect throw from Locke. He knows he's got the sideline protecting him on the backside. And that safety's coming, and yet he doesn't shy away from it. He brings it and catches it in his body and shields the ball from the safety and makes the catch. That set up the eventual game winner to JSN. Now, the Dallas game is best game of his career. This is the very next week. So he had a great stretch here, second half of the year. 6 catches, 134 yards, 3 touchdowns in this one. And everyone remembers the long one where he outruns everybody. And I'll show you that in a second. But to me, this was his most impressive catch. And again, shows off that skill set that I think is unique and it's worth paying for. Ball's on his outside shoulder. He's covered by Darren Bland, who led the league in interceptions last year. And he hauls it in. This is not an easy catch. Again, he uses his body to protect the ball. Gino trusts him, and he catches the ball. Gets both his feet in, gets knocked out, completes the process of the catch. And then this is what makes him special on top of all that. The kind of stuff we've seen so far, the name that comes to mind, it's kind of Anquan Bolden-esque, right? Big receiver, didn't have the elite speed to get separation, so was more of a possession receiver, but would make these big physical catches for you. But Anquan Bolden couldn't do this. Another deep dig route. This is kind of where he shines. And the ball is put perfectly, absolutely perfect throw from Gino, but over 2 defenders. And then he's off to the races. I think he clocked the highest miles per hour in the league for that particular week on the GPS, taking off after that. Like, that's the thing. And this is what I hope we see more of in a Ryan Grubb offense is trying to create opportunities for DK to get the ball while running full speed and get some run after the catch and get some yardage. And then I wanted to finish off with this one, a little frosting on the cake, because this is one that stuck with me for quite a while. I think it's a real highlight in Geno Smith's career as well. But this is back to 2022, obviously at LA, trailing on their last drive versus the Rams. DK for the game winner. Jalen Ramsey draped all over him. 36 seconds left. Like, this ball has to be caught. And he's not wide open, right? He puts his hand up because he knows he's got inside leverage on Ramsey, but the linebacker drops into coverage. He's right there. He's not going to not catch this ball. And I didn't add it to this, but it just occurred to me, top of my head. There was a game winner from Russ 3 years ago, against Minnesota. I think it was a Sunday night game. You remember this? I think it was 4th down to end the game. Tight coverage, contested catch, and he comes down with it. I think that is what makes DK special. I think it is a tremendous foundation to build on, that there's more in the tank, and that the future is bright. And hopefully, I submit that future should happen in a Seahawks uniform. So, in my opinion, you can see why Mike Macdonald has spoken so glowingly of DK Metcalf, and why he's been a lot more transparent lately about their plans with him, and how they plan to make him a focal point of the offense. How he has said you're never going to know where he's lining up or where he's going to come from. We heard Jake Bobo talk about that recently as well, that he can't wait until the regular season starts, because wait till you see what we're going to do with DK. I never know where he's going to be. The defense is never going to know how to plan for him. I think he's a weapon. Is he ever going to be a complete receiver? A perfect receiver? No. But you know who else wasn't a perfect, complete receiver? It was Steve Largent. And he's the all-time Seahawks reception leader in every category. And when he retired, he led the NFL in a lot of historical receiver categories and is a Hall of Famer. And he was kind of the opposite of DK. I get that, right? He was all about short area quickness and route running and getting sudden separation. But he wasn't going to flat out beat you off the line. He wasn't going to win a lot of 50-50 balls going up against elite cornerbacks. He's kind of the mirror image of that, DK is. But my point is, you don't have to be a complete, perfect receiver. There aren't many of those in history. Right? Even Jerry Rice, what did he run? A 4.6 40? But he used his elite skill set to make up for what he couldn't do. And I think DK is a weapon that if you use him properly and you lean on him, he's a guy that if this team's going to contend, if they're entering into a contention window with this young roster, I want him on the team. I want him on the team because those moments that he excels in that I just showed you are going to become more plentiful. And you're going to want a guy that's going to hit that dig route, that in-breaking route with a guy draped all over him, make a tough catch on 3rd and long to sustain a drive for the Seahawks to go win a game, to clinch a division, to move on in the playoffs, to get to a Super Bowl. I think there's more in the tank. I don't know if he'll ever have a 100 catch season. I don't think they're going to use him that way. But you look at the year that A.J. Brown had in 2022. His former college teammate. 88 catches, 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns. Even though that offense also featured Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, I think something like that is reasonable, and that's why I would absolutely look to extend him next year and sign him to a 3rd contract and keep him long term. I think he's a blue chip player. I think he's a dog. I think he's a competitor. He's a guy who thrives on pressure and in big moments, and that's a guy that you want on your roster. Coming up next, say Monday, most likely. I've been teasing this for a little bit, kind of a takeoff, sort of a sequel to the all-time team that I helped put together on the Hawks on Rundown podcast. I'm going to do an all-time Seahawks underrated team, but I'm going to get you involved. So look on my Twitter handle at Seahawks Forever over the next couple days. I'm going to be posting questions about each position on the roster and asking you for your vote for all-time underrated players, guys that you think were underrated. And then I'll put all that together and present it to you. Look for that on Monday. Until then, hit that subscribe button, the like button, hit the bell for notification of future episodes on YouTube. And I just thank you for your continued support of the show. It continues to grow. It's opening up some cool opportunities. Those will be announced very shortly as we get closer to training camp with the rookies reporting on July 17th. Cannot wait. I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. Forever and always go Hawks. Thanks for watching.